Good morning, Morai, Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. We are continuing on Masechet Rosh Hashanah, and we are on Daf Tetvav, Amud Aleph, 16 lines down from the top of the Amud, Amar Rabba. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut Refuah Shlema for Daniel Moshe ben Farangis, Rachel Simcha bat Nahid, and for the Hatzlacha of Miriam bat Nosrat and Yitzchak ben Tova. Today's Amud is also being learned as a zchut for the neshama of Tova bat Yaakov and Shlomo ben Yaakov, the neshamot Shlomo and Aliyah. This month's learning of the community has been graciously dedicated by the Shei and Mahabubi families. It should be an ultimate zchut for all the mishpachot. Amen. So we're going to basically discuss the tail end of the discussion regarding etrog when it comes to shvi'it and when it comes to maserot. The discussion that we had so far in the machloket Tanaim was that perhaps etrog could be different than regular trees, whereas other trees, everything goes after the beginning. When the chanata happens, when the fruits start sprouting, by etrog, it's not so simple. Maybe we go after shat lekita when you pick the fruit off the tree when it comes to maserot. Now the Gemara is going to discuss. Amar Rabba, etrog bat shishit shel nichnesa leshviit. Etrog also happens to be one of the trees that could stay on the tree for a long time, as we had in Masechet Sukkah. Hadar be'ilano, that's what's called peri etz hadar. Hadar be'ilano mishana leshana. It could stay for a whole year. So if you have a etrog that started in the 6th year and was picked on the 7th year, so what's the halacha now? In regards to the maserot, where do you follow? So says the Gemara, and also the Gabe Shvi'it, does he have the halachot of Shvi'it? Do you have to do bi'ur, which means we explained yesterday that the fruits of Shvi'it you could keep in your house. You could pick a lot and put it in your house and eat it from there. But the restriction is you could only keep it in your storage so long as it is available on the field. The moment that it's kala min hasadeh, it's no longer available outside on the fields, you have to also take it out of your storage houses. That we call bi'ur. You have to burn it out. You have to finish it up from your houses. So therefore, everything that is perot shvi'it is subject to shat bi'ur, right? Anything that's not fruits of shvi'it, obviously, is not subject to shat bi'ur. And on the other hand, the opposite flip side of it is that anything that is for shvi'it is or is not chayav b'maser, is not, because it's not yours. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, took control of the Shana Shvi'it. It's not yours to take. It has to be hefker. Hefker, you don't have maserot from hefker, right? So it kind of is the two opposites. When you have something that's considered fruits of the 6th year, it should be chayav b'maser, right? Because the regular year, and it should be patur from biur. Whereas if it's something that's considered halachically a 7th year, the Shana Shvi'it, if it's considered the Shemitah year's fruit, then obviously it is chayav bebiur. It's subject to biur, but it's patur from maser. So it's the two opposites. And now this Gemara is going to discuss 3 shitas when it comes to the comparison of biur and maser. First, we're going to have Rabbah. Then we're going to have Rab Hamnuna, and then we're going to ask a question on both of them from a Braita, from none other than Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So there are 2 Amoraim that both of them are going to be challenged by a Shita of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which is a Tana in a Braita that we actually have mentioned. We're going to mention it again. So what does Rabbah hold? Rabbah is actually a little problematic. We'll explain it in just a moment. But what he says is the following. Amar Rabbah said, If you have a etrog bat shishit shenichnesah le'shvi'it, the 6th year was the beginning of the etrog's growth, and you picked it off the tree on shvi'it, on shnat hashmita, petura mina maaser uptura mina biur, is patur from everything. It's the best case scenario, right? You don't have to give maaser on it. You also don't have, you can keep it in your storage houses, you don't have to burn it, which usually doesn't happen, right? This is the best case scenario for the owner. You could keep it in your storage house and you don't have to tie it, you don't have to give maaser. Now, that's the ratio, that's the beginning of what he said, the first case. The second scenario the Rabbah says is, bat shvi'it hanichneset l'shminit, if it is started growing, if it started growing in the Shemitah year, and then it was picked off the tree on Shanat HaShemitah was the growth, and Shminit, the 8th year, was when you picked it off the tree, says Rabbah, P'tura b'maaser, P'tura mina maaser, it's patur from giving maaser, v'chayevet bevi'ur, and it is, subject to shat biur. So when you say subject to shat, when you tell me that it is patur from maaser, means what? This is consistent. Means that it is the 7th year. If it started growing in the Shemitah year, it's patur from maaser, even though that you took it off the tree on the 8th year, it still is patur from maaser, which indicates it is the 7th year's produce. And therefore, it is very consistent what Rabbah says afterwards, that you have to also be concerned about biur. Because when something is the fruit of Shemitah year, it's patur from maaser, it's chayav bebiur. That's very consistent, right? But the first thing that Rabbah said is absolutely not consistent, right? Pay attention, Rabotai. If you tell me that something is patur from maaser, if it started growing in the 6th year, you picked it off the tree on the 7th year, and you tell me it's patur from giving maaser, and that indicates that what year is it from? The 7th year, Shemitah year. That's why it's patur from maaser. So if it's from 7th year, what else does it have to have? Biur. It has to be chayav bebiur, right? However you slice this, it doesn't make sense, the ratio of Rabbah. He says it's patur from maaser. If it's patur from maaser, means it is the Shemitah years. If it's Shemitah years, it has to be chayav bebiur. He said, Rabbah says it's patur from biur. I take it the other way around. If you tell me it's patur from biur, means it is the 6th years. If it's the 6th years, it has to be chayav b'maaser. So how can you be holding this? You're holding the rope on both of its ends. You can't do that. You can't have it both ways. This is like having your cake and eating it too. It's literally that, right? You can't do that. Says the Gemara. The Gemara asks this very question. Amar le Abaye, the Talmud of Rabbah, says, Kvod HaChacham, Mechila, but it doesn't make any sense what you're saying. Bishlama, I understand the seifa of what you said, right? The seifa of what Rabbah said was the case that is going from the 7th to the 8th year, right? And what does Rabbah say? Is patur from maaser, is chayav bebiur. It makes absolutely sense, right? Because we are telling you that we go after shat chanata. That's what we're saying. That by etrog you go after shat chanata, and therefore shvi'it hanichneset l'shminit, it's 7th that's going on the 8th, is considered 7th year's produce. Nekuda. And it makes perfect sense because it's consistent. Bishlama seifa lechumra. I understand the seifa is lechumra. That when you say that it is patur from maaser, which means it's shvi'it, the chumrah of it would be that now you have to be chayav bebiur. I understand that. But Aval Resha, says the Gemara, but the Resha, the beginning of the case that you mentioned, Shishit anichneset l'shvi'it, the 6th year going on Shemitah, that you tell me is patur from everything, how does that make sense? Patura mina biur, if you tell me it's patur from burning it out, from biur, am I? Why is it patur from biur? The amrina and zil batar chanata. The reason is because we say it is considered shvi'it fruit, 7th year, remember, 7th year going to the 8th year, but you tell me that is Chayab B'Biur, you're telling me basically that you go after Chanata, and this is considered the fruit of Shvit. So Ihachi, if that's correct, Tichayab B'Maser. It has to be Chayab B'Maser. Right? If you're telling me that this is considered after Chanata, you go after the 6th year, and that's why it's Patur from Biur, then it has to be Chayav b'Maser. And if you tell me that it is Patur from Maser, which indicates that it's the Shvit year, you go after Lekita, not Chanata, then if you tell me that, then it has to be Chayav b'Biur. You can't have it both ways. It's either the 6 years, and therefore it doesn't have Kedushat Shvit, and it has to be Chayav b'Maser, or it's the 7th years, it has Kedushat Shvit, and it's Chayav b'Biur. So says the Gemara, Amar le, this is the Rebbe speaking to the Talmud, right? Rabbi speaking to Abaye. It says, Chacham Abaye, you are missing a massive thing over here. Yad hakol memashmeshin ba ve'at amra tichayev b'maser. Says Rabbi, yeah, this is really the 6 years fruit, right? Again, remember, this is shishit hanichneset the shvi'it. Says Rabbi, yeah, take, this is considered after Chanata, you go after the beginning, and it's considered the fruits of the Shvit. And therefore, it's Patur from Biur. You tell me it should be Chayab b'Maser. Says Rabbi, think again. It's correct that this is the 6 years produce, and technically it should be Chayab b'Maser, but it is on the tree still when you enter Shana HaShavi'it. Shana Shvit is Shemitah. What's happening to the field of this specific particular etrog on Shvit? The door of the field is open or locked? Open. Everybody's coming in. Everyone is touching this. It happens to be that this specific etrog started growing on Shishit, and therefore it has the halacha of Shishit. But who cares? At the end of the day, practically speaking, this is hefker. I can't lock the door on Shana Shvit. So even those fruits that started growing on Shana Shishit become hefker. So for all intents and purposes, it is considered hefker. And something that's hefker does have maser or not? Doesn't have maser. So says Rabbah, you're correct. Abaye is very smart, always very sharp. The questions are amazing, right? But I says, your questions are awesome because we are going after Shana Shishit. And you have a good question that this should be Chayab b'Maser. Because technically on the books, this is the 6th year's produce. But who cares about technically? Practically speaking, the doors are open, everyone is pouring in. It's not my field anymore. It's not my field, I'm patur from Maser. And you want to suggest that it should be Chayab b'Maser? Why? It's not my field anymore on this year. So says the Gemara, this was Rabbah. So remember, let's chazer this together, not to forget before we go to Rabbah. Rabbah is much more, Rav Hamnuna is much more straightforward. Rabbah holds that we had so far that if you have Shishit going to Shvi'it, it's patur from everything. It's patur from Maser, it's also patur from Biur. If you have Shvi'it going on Shminit, then what's the halacha? It's patur from, what does the Gemara say? Bat Shvi'it shenichnesat l'shminit patura min ha'maser v'chayevet bebiur. Which means, we go after what? Shat Chanata, basically. Basically what Rabbah says is, we go after Shat Chanata with one caveat, that when you have Shishit going to Shvi'it, even though that if you go after Shat Chanata, it would be Chayav v'Maser, still you're going to be practically speaking Patur from Maser because Yata Kol Memashmeshet Bo. Because everyone is coming to your field is Hefker. So therefore, even Shishit going on Shvi'it, so long as the fruit is there on Shvi'it and it was picked on Shvi'it, you're Patur from Maser because your land is Hefker. Even though that on the books, in Halacha, we go after the Chanata, the beginning, right? That's Rabbah. Rav Hamnuna says, a little different. Says Rab Hamnuna, Rab Hamnuna Amar, Bat Shishit Shenichnesa LeShavi'it, a sixth going to the seventh, Leolam Shishit, is always considered Shishit. Ubat Shavi'it Anichneset LeSheminit, and seventh going to eighth, Leolam Shvi'it, is always considered Shavi'it. So here he holds that we don't have this practical thing. We have sixth going to seventh, it's Chayav B'Maser. Your land is practically, doesn't matter. You're Chayav B'Maser. And seventh going to eighth, right, is going to be always dealt with as Shvi'it. Therefore, it's going to be Patur from Maser, correct, but it's going to be Chayav B'Biur. Good. Now the Gemara drops a bombshell. It says, wait a second, this is Amoraim talking, right? Rabbah, Rab Hamnuna. They both seem to have missed a braita directly speaking in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Says the Gemara, Metivi, they asked him, Bet Midrash, how does this work with the braita that we had before actually? We're going to bring it again. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says from none other than Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's name, Etrog bat Shvi'it, Shishit. Listen well. A trog that started growing on the sixth year. Shenichneset leshvi'it, that started growing and it entered now the Shemitah year. P'tura mina maser, right? It is patur from maser, up'tura mina biur. And it's patur from biur. This is so far like who? Exactly like Rabbah, right? It's identical, like Rabbah. But not from the same reason. The reason of Rabbah was what? Practically speaking, is Hefker, right? That was the reason of Rabbah. Listen to the reason of Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli. She'en lecha davar shechayav b'maser ela im ken gadel b'chiyuv melinkat b'chiyuv. No produce has chiyuv maser unless its entire growth, including it being plucked away from the land, was in the time of Chiyuv Maser. Shanat HaShemitah, is it Chiyuv Maser? No. So if it was Nilkat B'Shvi'it, anything that was picked off the ground on Shvi'it, is Patur from Maser because of that. Because it has to grow and be picked up on time of Chiyuv. And Shvi'it is not time of Chiyuv Maser. Okay, but the next sentence becomes even more problematic. So first sentence that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says already is a kasha on who? On Rav Hamnuna. Because remember, what did Rav Hamnuna say? Rav Hamnuna said we always go after the beginning, right? So therefore, Shishit hanichneset leShvi'it, what's the halacha according to Rav Hamnuna? You're chayav b'maser, right? And patur mina biur. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai already saying you're patur from maser. That's already knocks out Rabbi Hamnuna, right? The ratio of Rabbi Shimon already is not like Rabbi Hamnuna. We also mentioned parenthetically that it also, even though that the din is like Rabbah, but is for a different reason. Now the seifa of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is even worse. Says Rabbi Shlomo Bar Yochai, ubat shvi'it shenichneset l'shminit. If the etrog started growing on the 7th year, and he was finished and picked off the tree on the 8th year, says the Gemara, then it's going to be petura min ha'maser, upetura min habiur. Also going to be patur from everything. Why? Says the Gemara, she'en lecha davar shechayav bebiur. Nothing is chayav bebiur unless elaim ken gadel b'shvit and nilkat b'shvit. Unless it grew its entire growth in Shemitah year and it was picked off on Shemitah year as well. The only thing that you have to be concerned that after Shat Biur you can't hold it in your house, you can't hold it in your storage, is something that completely grew on Shvi'it, including its being picked off the tree or the ground, right? So therefore, if you have Shemitah year starting and you pick it off on the Shminit, on the 8th year, obviously, according to Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli, you don't have biur, right? And also you don't have maaser, because for maaser it has to be growing and picked off either on Shishit or Sheminit, right? Now this seifa of Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli is against everybody, because let's go through this. This is something that we would traditionally write on a board, but it's not that difficult, right? If once you chaser it, what did Rabbah say about 7th year going to the 8th? What did Rabbah say? We go after 7th year, right? That's what we said. So therefore, it's chayav it's chayav bebiur, but patur mimaaser, right? That's how he said. What did Rab Hamnuna say? Rab Hamnuna said the same thing. That is chayav bebiur and patur minamaaser. What does Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli say? It's patur for everything. Everybody else says that it's chayav bebiur. Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli says, no, it's not chayav bebiur, because it wasn't totally and absolutely the produce of Shvi'it. It was picked on Shminit, you already don't have to do maaser. If it's attached to the tree when Shnat Shemitah finishes, you don't have the halacha of biur. You could pick it off, hold it in your storage until Mashiach comes, right? And no problem. So that, Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli now is not like anybody. Or we should say the other way around, because we ask from Tanaim on Amoraim, right? Rabbah is not like this Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli. Rabbi Hamnuna for sure is not like this. Rabbah only in the Seifa is not like Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli. Rabbi Hamnuna both in Reisha and in Seifa. The entire Rabbi Hamnuna stands against Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli. Says the Gemara. Reisha Kashel Rav Hamnuna. The Reisha of Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli is a question on Rav Hamnuna only, because it's not a kasha on Rabbah, it's identical with Rabbah. And Seifa, the Seifa of Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli is kasha ben Rabbah ben Rav Hamnuna. Then that is not like anybody. So says the Gemara, no problem. You're asking for Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli on this Amoraim. It only would be a kasha if you didn't have a Tana that would disagree with Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli. If I find that this is actually machloket Tanaim, and I could tell you that Rabbah and Hamnuna are following other Tanaim, then I would be good to go, right? Now, what is the core of this machloket? The core of this machloket is that both Rabbah and Rab Hamnuna follow when? The beginning. That's how they. So all we need is to find the Tana that doesn't follow the beginning, because again, Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli over here is not following the beginning. So says the Gemara, Tanaihi, this is machloket Tanaim. The Tanya, as we learned in the Braita, Amar Rabbi Yossi said, Abtulmus Hayid, Mr. Abtulmus came to the Betin and he gave his testimony. His testimony was in the name of Chamisha Zekenim, right? Of 5 of the Talmidei Chachamim, 5 of the Zekenim. Now this is, as we will see in just a moment, a dut that was given, testimony that was given in the time of Rabbi Gamliel of Usha. Now, what happened was towards the end of Bayit Sheni, right, the head of Sanhedrin, and following that the entire Sanhedrin, moved to Usha, right, outside of their main chamber next to the Beit HaMikdash. And the reason for that was they wanted to not be able to do Dinei Nefashot anymore, because the Gemara darshins from the Pasuk, there has to be Etzel Mizbeach. If the Sanhedrin is next to the Mizbeach, then they could do Dinei Nefashot. If they're not, then they can't. And they wanted to take themselves out of doing Dinei Nefashot, because unfortunately the situation was so dire that there were so many Dinei Nefashot to be judged, and they could not do justice to Dinei Nefashot. Dinei Nefashot, normally speaking, would be machmitz. They would wait on it, for months and months and months to try to get edut and figure out exactly what happened. It was a full-time job for weeks on end, to make sure that this is not a setup, This is not, they would do so many dirishot v'chakirot to try to catch the edim, to see if this is like a setup that they made up a whole story, and it's a front story, it's a cover-up story, and so on and so forth. But when you have these cases just, shot at you, case after case after, they felt that it's not responsible, and they moved out. Now, a lot of things, this is the time that Klal Yisrael was going through a lot of changes, so you have a lot of takanot in Usha. That's why Usha became a very famous name, because you have a lot of things that happened in that short period of time in Usha, and this is one of them, right? Says the Gemara, Etrog achar lekitato. This is the testimony that they gave in this Braita, in the name of 5 zekenim, that etrog achar lekitato lemaaser, that we follow the time of lekita, the time that you pick off the fruit of etrog off the tree when it comes to masrot. This is where it is. V'rabotenu nimnu beusha, and our sages, they stood to account, right? That means they took a vote, basically. They took a vote in Usha, ve'amru, and they said, achar lekitato ben lemaaser ben leshvit, that we follow by etrog, the shat lekita, the time of harvest, the time that you take it off the tree, both for masrot and for shvit, right? So from this you see what? When you have to take a vote, means what? There's machloket. You never have to take a vote. Everyone says one thing. Obviously, you don't have a vote, right? Vote is only when there's machloket. So from here you see, says the Gemara, that this was a serious machloket, serious enough that they needed to take a vote to see who is the Rabbim, who is the Yachid, right? But it was a serious, almost even out machloket. And from here you see that there were those who said that you go after the beginning, and there were those who say you go after lekita. All we need is those who say you go after beginning. And you see from the fact that they had to have a vote and paskin that you go after shat lekita, that almost 50% said you go after shat chanata. And that's going to be like Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna. That's all we need for now. Gemara says, wait a second. Who spoke about Shvi'it altogether? Right? By Shvi'it is no question. Right? I thought it's only for Masrot that is a question. Who spoke about Shvi'it? Shvi'it mandachar shmeh. Who even spoke about Shvi'it? Right? This whole of Tulmus, Chamisha Zkenim, we were talking about Maaser only. See that? Of Tulmus heit mishum Chamisha Zkenim, etrog achar lekitato lemaaser. He didn't talk about, of Tulmus didn't talk about Shvi'it. So why is the Sefer of the Braita all of a sudden says, they voted that it's going to be after Lekita, both by Maaser and Shvi'it. Who spoke about Shvi'it? That wasn't part of the question, right? So says, no. This was not said properly. The proper way of saying it is like this. Chasur mechsera v'hachikatani. This is the way it should be said. Etrog achar lekitato, the edut that he gave in the name of Chamisha Zekenim was etrog achar lekitato lemaaser. You go after lekita, shat lekita for maaser. V'achar chanata, and you go after the start of the sprouting and the growth when it comes to Shvi'it. V'achar chanata leShvi'it. V'rabotenu nimru beusha, and they voted in Usha, and they said no, both for Maaser and for Shvi'it, we follow the time of Lekita. Achar lekitato ben Maaser ben leShvi'it. Now, we're going to now have a little count up of what Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish hold. What's the halacha leMaaseh when it comes to etrog for Shishit and Shvi'it? And this is actually something that's going to be very important when it comes to the Chag HaSukkot, because we deal with the Shemitah year very seriously when the etrog is coming from Eretz Yisrael, at least, and therefore a lot of people invest in buying etrogim from Chutz La'aretz, from California, from Morocco, and so on and so forth. So you have from Europe. You have to know if you really have to be careful or not, which year do you have to be careful? Do you go after, in other words, when you have a etrog that it reaches your hands, right, on the Shnat Shemitah, oftentimes it has been picked in the previous year, and when you have it in Shminit, that it reaches your hand, oftentimes it has been picked on the Shemitah year, right? So where do you follow? Do you go after when it started growing, or do you go after when it was picked? Because even if it was picked on Shana Shminit, if it started growing in Shmita year, and you say you go after Shat HaChanata, then you have a problem. If you go after Shat HaKita, then the previous year you have a problem, right? So that becomes very halakha l'maaseh, and it's not only that, because when you have, even though the people have what's called otzar bedin, we have to talk about this a little bit more at length. There's a heter of Shemitah year for etrogim that come to a business market, because you can't do business with perot shavit. So how can you have people standing up, setting up shop and selling the etrogim of Shvi'it? How can you have such a thing? You have to answer that, right? So there's a heter called otzar bedin, which we can explain. But even after that, you still have to deal with the fact that these fruits are kadosh, right? These fruits are kadosh because they are shvit fruits. And therefore, after you're done with Chag HaSukkot, you have to be concerned about the biur, shat biur. So it becomes really a halakha l'maaseh for us to know which year you have to be concerned about shat biur, because that's something that we have to deal with for the wines that come from Eretz Yisrael, for the avocado creams that come from Eretz Yisrael, and from obviously the fruits of Shvi'it that directly come here, as far as the tomatoes and the Jaffa fruits and so on, and obviously the etrogei Shvi'it as well, which is something that we're going to discuss in the next Shiurim, Hashem.